Trump was going on and on. I love Elon. He's giving me $45 million a month and he doesn't want anything in return. By the way, I'm changing my views on EVs or I'm buying. Totally. And I'm like, yeah, he didn't ask for anything. Look at that.
Totally. Didn't even need to.
Didn't even need to. Money speaks. Money speaks. Hello, friends. Welcome to another week of More or Less. What's cooking, Morins?
Hey, guys.
I feel like a lot's happened since last week. We thought it was going to be a dull summer, and then all of a sudden, all the news came at once.
What happened?
Is our house still alive?
It's incredible. Yes, we've moved into the Lessons house, which we're so grateful for.
Glad to host the refugees.
We're fixing some infrastructure, but you know.
Dave, the fact you have a virtual background up, I'm like, did you burn it down?
We don't want to show you what's happened since.
Oh, man.
I think we get a Nest alert if that happened. I don't know.
No, I lost access to that when I got hacked. I have no more Nest alerts to our Jackson Hole house.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. Well,
do you need me to put some new stuff up for you?
No, it's cool. It's
all right.
Cool.
Put Dave to work while we're here. He's a certified electrician.
If you can just unpack my sleeping bag when it comes, that'd be great.
All right, cool.
Okay. Well, you guys are in the clear-aired mountains. We're in East Coast.
Well, to be clear, it's not clear-aired, Jess. There's smoke everywhere.
Oh, is there?
Yeah. You can barely see the Tetons.
Oh,
yeah.
Bummer.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, bummer. Gosh.
There's a lot of fires. It's a bad fire season in the West already.
Well, it's because it's been 2 years of good fire season, so eventually shit has to burn.
Oh, exactly.
No. Yeah, my brother is a forest fire chief in Montana, and he was telling me that almost all of the equipment in the U.S. is currently deployed right now. Like, there's enough fire going on.
Oh, my goodness. I didn't know that. Well, that is sad. Hoping it passes quickly. Well, friends, last week we were here, and Sam said the election was over. So, Sam, do you think the election's over?
I don't know. I mean, it's like,
That's a no. That's a no.
I mean, I would argue
you can't be gray on this.
It is less over than it was, is what I would basically say.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
But I mean,
the numbers changed significantly. Have you not seen all the latest polls?
Yeah. I mean, look, honestly, if Donald Trump can manage to get shot and not win the election, that is a real statement about the state of 2024, because you're supposed to, if you get shot, you're supposed to immediately win. It's like that's
based on like one article you read about Ronald Reagan, I think.
Well, I just think
I don't know.
My interesting tech story on it was I don't know. You guys followed this whole thing where like the story for days was Elon's giving Trump like $50 million a month,
45
crazy number, and he obviously like. It either was true or he just like let that be there until like today. It was like, no, it's not true. I'm not doing that.
Oh, really?
Most telling. Well, it's just funny. I mean, like Elon has a funny history, right? Because you look at OpenAI and his statements about funding and then not funding it. You look at even Twitter where he's like, I'm going to buy it, and then tried to not buy it and was forced to buy it. Elon has a pretty strong history of writing big checks.
Are you saying Elon's wishy-washy? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I just think, who knows at this point in history what's real and what's not. But there's a clear pattern of write a big headline check or let a headline sit and then step back from it. The fact that he stepped back from his commitments, to Donald Trump at that level clearly say the election might not be fully over. And everyone's and the whole group that went to curry favor with Trump realizes they might now have to deal with Kamala regulating them instead. So it's an interesting world. I have to say, I'm not thrilled about either choice. I feel like what you have is caricatures of the extremes of both parties. But look, what will end up happening is there's no question. If you ever wanted extreme narratives and conflict, you have your game now. You have, the absolute, caricatures of each extreme party running against each other.
I don't think Harris is an extreme. I mean, the left has extremes that are way, way more extreme.
Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, she's pretty moderate.
Now, just, yes. And again, Trump is also not, I mean, he is extreme as Trump, but there are factions of the Republican Party.
Wait, are you claiming that Trump is not the most extreme wing of the Republican Party?
Well, it
Not
depends
anymore.
it depends what dimension you're talking about. I mean, he revised the platform to not oppose necessarily gay marriage, as an example. And there are a lot of Republicans who would have it. So I am not supporting Donald Trump.
He also
but I'm
revised
just
the
saying,
abortion platform.
he has definitely revised the platform in some ways, and then he's revised it in other ways that you could say are more out of it. So
I just think, I mean, I would say until recently, I would argue that most people would say that Trump is the epitome of extreme MAGA-ness, right? And there's a lot of moderate
right, but MAGA there are many camps within the Republican Party.
It's complicated. And Kamala, look, again, she's fine in certain ways, but the narrative of, she was made vice president in a deal on largely, gender, race, and color rather than credentials, I think is true and represents an interesting part of that party. So we'll see. I mean, it's clearly
politics. That's politics.
Yeah, that's how they're choosing the current vice president.
Our main topic for today is not going to be this. It's actually going to be a bigger topic looming. But I say it's very early to see Harris run. You could say of many presidential candidates, of course, they get there by circumstance more than, any innate other characteristics. And I'm really interested to see what policy she's going to articulate around the tech industry.
Me too.
Is she going to stick with
the
Biden con antitrust? I mean, she's former prosecutor.
I don't think she can
Attorney General.
win.
Or is she going to change? I mean, what is she going to be saying behind closed doors? And so I think, and I've been searching, I think on the antitrust issue, it's hard to know at the moment. And then crypto, we'll see. AI is interesting, and that is what we're going to talk about today. I mean, she led kind of in a ceremonial way a lot of the sessions with the industry before Biden came out with the executive order. I don't really know. I'm curious how much she was actually interacting in the meat and potatoes of it in those sessions. I just don't know yet, but that I think is going to be important too, as well as other things. But it's been fascinating just as it relates to the tech industry to see now, all these leaders. We reported Reed Hastings has given her a big chunk of change. I don't know if what Hoffman said publicly yet, but Khosla behind her. And I think there is just this sense of somewhat of relief, not necessarily unbridled optimism, but relief that there's now another candidate and platform for that part of the tech industry.
I would say that I think it's good that, from a totally realpolitik perspective and tech policy perspective versus any other deeper, policy or beliefs in America, et cetera, it is not bad that at least there are tech leaders now on both sides, right? Because that will create at least some leverage and lobbying power on both sides because there are major tech issues and regulation afoot.
Yeah. Well, let's see if the ones on Trump's side give the money, but we'll see. I mean, that's cheeky of me. Obviously, he's raised.
I mean, it will be
he's raised a bunch of money already from the
anymore.
tech industry. But I did see last weekend I saw a clip from a Trump rally. Trump was going on and on. I love Elon. He's giving me $45 million a month, and he doesn't want anything in return. By the way, I'm changing my views on EVs, or I'm clarifying because I'm clarifying my views. I'm not against the industry. I just don't think there should be mandates. And I'm like, yeah, he didn't ask for anything. Look at that.
Totally.
Didn't even need to.
Money speaks. Money speaks. Okay, guys. So I want to take us and I want to explain this topic a little bit because it can seem really wonky. And the great thing about More or Less is we have a ton of people in the tech industry, but also many adjacent. And so I want to talk a little bit about this kind of raging debate around open source versus closed source AI. Again, our listeners in the industry are going to be very versed in this. But this week, Mark Zuckerberg issued a missive, as he is wont to do from time to time, an open letter The man likes his keyboard.
I love that he did it as a screenshot essay. Just want to call that out. Screenshot essays are
He
ascendant.
probably typed it on his phone, but
Oh, he did a reel as well, wearing the chains. Like, you got to give him the
Nothing
cred.
makes me happier than a good screenshot essay posted on social media.
Posted on Threads.
Mark took the opportunity of a new Llama release to talk about open source. And as many of you will know, Llama, which is Facebook or Meta's large language model, is open source, whereas Anthropic and Google with Gemini and ChatGPT at OpenAI are not. And for a while now, I mean, this was really Meta's kind of wedge into the industry back then. We've pulled up the letter. It was a different tack, and instantly has been, it's sort of inflamed a debate on lots of sides. One of them, obviously, national security and security in general. There are people who say open source gives away key technology to competitors, to governments like China, countries like China, and so forth. And so that's one huge knock against it. There's also many, many others. And this debate, I think, is going to actually be quite important for how AI shapes up and the future of Washington and Silicon Valley. So I thought we can dig into it a little bit. How does that sound now that I'm springing it on everyone?
Well, look, I think the thing I would just, yes, of course, but I'd like to tie it at the outset to another major tech news in the moment, then we can go back to the AI side, which is CrowdStrike, which I think if you understand like the difference between, there's this fundamental thing about, do you want highly centralized or decentralized systems running the world? Centralization has lots of benefits. It can be efficient. It is, you can be secure until it's not, like there are things that are better about it. But the fuck ups are enormous, right? Because you have single points of failure, right? And so when things go bad, they go really bad. And so it was kind of wild to watch this CrowdStrike where we had this like phantom high centralization that no one was really paying attention to, where CrowdStrike took down like the entire Western economy for a day. Everyone but Southwest Airlines, which was so cheap they had never uploaded their system.
Sam, explain what CrowdStrike is again to people.
It's like a little, it's funny. It's like this.
Does anyone really know what it is?
Yeah, I was going to say, because I couldn't do it very well.
What's hilarious is I actually talk about like unintended, narratives. Like a month ago, I put CrowdStrike on my computer for the first time when I had this like hacking incident to just scan and make sure there's no malware.
Oh no.
It's cool. It's like basically, you put drop a little software on your machine. It monitors things continuously. There's like a NOC or like a network operating center. We have a bunch of people like, cleaning up malware and like managing these machines remotely. It's security software, but it's one of those things where like people, they've been successful, not enormous, but they kind of, I think it was like 300 companies or something, but really big companies, were running their software. And it's a classic example of like phantom centralization where like everyone was relying on this thing. And then when it goes down hard, right? Because it is hyper centralized, right? And so I think when you think about, there's a whole story about open versus closed, distributed power, distributed risk versus centralized risk. But it is funny that this week we had the Zuckerberg letter and Llama 3 talking about, let's make sure we decentralize AI a little bit, right? And open source it in a way that people can run different things. And we have like this great example of what happens when things get over centralized in terms of risk vectors.
So, but let's take on the point, to summarize it just quickly too. So Mark's main defense of open source is it's actually going to be more secure because you're going to have more eyeballs on it, essentially.
Yeah, that's
to
true.
Promote. I'm going to list them quickly and we can go through
That's
them.
the Bitcoin argument, by the way.
Yeah. Also, that's secure from sort of a breach standpoint, but also from an overall AI safety and sort of the unintended effects that these models might have in causing harm. He says it's going to be cheaper, which is something I want to dig into a little bit because at least today, I know the startups running Llama say it's not cheaper, but there might be something I'm missing there. And then basically, and to the point that like, this is giving away our source code to our enemies, he's basically saying our enemies have it anyway. And that I think he wrote, unfortunately, the large tech companies are not secure enough to prevent espionage and leaks, and that this stuff can fit on a thumb drive. And so he's basically saying, let's assume China will get, and he singles them out this anyway. And so the idea that it's somehow more protected inside these big companies, he thinks is false. And then, of course, he's very open about having learned the challenges of partnering with closed platforms like Apple, and how doing so set Meta, then Facebook, kind of back, and that this is very top of mind for him in why he wants AI to be open source, and also the approach that he wants to take in AR VR. So I think those are the kind of main ones: cost, safety, detecting harm, and just general openness for the startup economy. What do you guys think?
I do feel like it sounds a lot like crypto in many ways. Everyone's so worried about crypto for so many reasons, but at the end of the day, decentralization and sort of ownership over your own stuff in terms of, in crypto, your money, right? And to some extent, and your assets, your content, whatever is blockchain enabled, is the sort of whole vision of crypto. And I think what he's saying is very similar in the internet. Yeah.
And America.
Yeah. And I actually, I'm actually on the Meta side on this one. And I think that, I've read a bunch of articles, with people that lead the Center for AI Safety and all kinds of other sort of AI regulatory nonprofits who are saying Meta's actually done a pretty good job at testing these models before releasing them. They're tracking them very closely. They're trying to safeguard them as much as possible. And I don't know, I just think that they're doing this with their eyes wide open. It's not like, I'm sure that it will be used in many ways for bad reasons, but so is all technology, right? And so will, OpenAI. So I'm on the Meta side here.
I'm on the Meta side too. I highly believe in this direction. I think Mark is great for pushing it, and it's correct. Let me give the two counter arguments for the sake of debating. One is let's talk about weapons, right? And centralization versus decentralization. We probably all would agree that nuclear weapons should not be available to all. Outside of Snow Crash, where people have nuclear weapons strapped to their backs, right? The upshot is like mutually assured destruction works okay when you have 10 countries with nukes. It's not going to work so well if everyone in the world has a nuclear weapon. At the other end of the spectrum, I think no one thinks you should limit people from having access to slingshots, right? Or bow and arrow. And there's a raging debate about whether people should have access to AR-14s, right? Also relevant in the news today, right? And so the counter argument to decentralization makes us all safer is if you believe, as some people do, that AI is effectively a nuclear weapon, right? Then arms control, maybe you have to have it. Maybe it's too dangerous. Now, I don't believe that, but that is an argument you could make. The second thing I'd say, which is this is a nice moment where I think it's worth just owning the fact that Meta's business strategy and open source are highly aligned in a way that is not true for the companies that are hawking closed models, right? And so It is nice. I agree with Mark. I think it comes from a pure place, and I think he's right. And I'm thrilled that a major company is willing to put the level of resources he is into open sourcing a model like this. I think it's good for everyone. But it's a clearly good business decision if you're Meta to do this. It's not a good business decision if you're OpenAI, right? And so
Sam,
I think
why don't you explain why the business model is aligned?
Well, in the end of the day, if you're Meta, you have all the data, and importantly, you have an enormous amount of attention. You have engagement. Let's take the most basic uses of AI, right? Which is who's going to make Meta's ads better and more efficient? It doesn't really matter if it's Meta or someone else doing that. Either way, Meta gets paid on that, right? And so if anything, encouraging as much development, as much advancement, et cetera, as you possibly can, you make all the money anyway, right? It all comes back through your door. It's the same thing with people talked about, should Meta be in the business of, being a creative agency or managing X, Y, and Z? They don't care. The answer is they want to be in the highest margin part of the business, which they are. And so here's let 1,000 follow booms, we're going to get paid anyway. That's very different than, an OpenAI that is trying to actually own the model, right? And make money on owning the model. And I just think that's it's a nice quirk of history. Sometimes you get those, but I think that it is an interesting one to call out, which is again, I'm fully on board with this. I think he's right. It's the right approach. It's the right approach for the world. But you do kind of have to acknowledge the fact that the people who disagree for security reasons, it's because they think AI is a nuclear weapon, not a handgun. And then B, it is self-serving as well, which isn't bad. It's just you have to call it out.
Yeah, I mean, as my colleagues at The Information have reported, OpenAI is making $1 billion a year in selling access to its model. I mean, that's its business.
Well, yeah. And that's not going to last, right? Like,
actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, Sam. That was another Mark's points I thought was interesting. He said, that these models are going to catch up in capabilities regardless. And basically the moat around them is going to, do you shrink a moat? I guess you shrink a moat. You fill in a moat from the perspective that the differences in capabilities are basically going to vanish between the foundation sort of leading models. And so,
well, it's just too liquid a market, right? Is like what it comes down to is like, it's too easy for developers to go where it's cheapest, right? And like also like be smart about which calls you send where and like minimize your calls to anything. So if you're slightly better at X, fine, you can make a tiny bit of money for 6 months being slightly better at X. There's just no way there's actually money in that business long term, right?
So that leads to another part of this, and I think Brett, David, and Sam, you guys are way more qualified on this than I am, but like what it's like for startups right now in terms of how they're developing with these models. So we've talked about the fact that like OpenAI's tools are vastly superior, especially to Gemini. And I continue to hear, but very anecdotally, that like if you're trying to use Llama, then you need to use Hugging Face. And then, and there's like it seems like the people who want to go the open source route still have to go through a lot of hoops, but that's a few months old. So like, what's the state of play?
I don't want to dominate, but I want to make 2 points on this because I think are important. One is the real OpenAI advantage right now is it's the simplest API. And big companies lose sight of this because big companies don't give a shit about how simple an API is. Even Amazon, it's like really hard to set up. It's hard to do stuff, but they don't care because that's not where the volume comes from. But like if you're a tiny startup, the only advantage OpenAI has is like the auth pattern is super easy and it's easy to like script a request against it and it's integrated with Retool and whatever else.
But say that in English. When the API is really easy to use, like
you just like literally like post a request with a key to an endpoint and it sends you back a result. And like, it's incredibly dead simple to use. So if you're Sam and sitting in the basement doing a small project, right? Like Hearsay, the thing I built, it's like so easy to work with. And like the thing about Llama or anything is like, there just doesn't exist. Like someone will package that eventually, but like they don't prioritize that. I actually think it's a strategic mistake. I think they should purely for developer mindshare, not as a business.
It sounds like the letter says that they're building new teams internally to do that.
Yeah, but it's like, it shouldn't take that long. I mean, this is like 101.
No, anyway, I think this is a key point. Yeah.
I just think it's like one of those things people forget. It's like, actually there's nothing, like, if there was a thing that was 80% as good as OpenAI and just as easy to use, we get a ton of use, right? It's just like people don't think with true 0 to 1 startups in mind, except for OpenAI, and they did a nice job with that. Second point, interestingly, one thing that you figured out is actually very much like the ad ecosystem long term, which is you need to create an ecosystem where your partners can make money, right? Like you need to actually, and so ironically, right, if this is like the longer term strategy, if you're like a Meta, the question is, what can you give to Accenture that can mark up 1,000x and do something and resell? Like, what is your reseller play in a way that actually gets deployments done? And so ironically, the OpenAI play, which is like, this is a super easy tool for 0 to 1 developers with nothing to use, is nice if you're a developer. It creates a lot of buzz. But the more interesting business question, very much like the ads business actually, is how do you package things in a way that gets the people around you paid? And that is actually where open source and kind of saying, oh, actually, it's hard to write against this, but it's not impossible. So pay some Accenture random people $1 gajillion, which then they're like, oh, well, you know what? If we're going to sell this for you because we make money on it, that becomes the more sophisticated play around these types of tool chains.
Do you think OpenAI was trying to get to that with the GPT store or whatever they called it?
Yeah, but it's too consumer. It's like, I mean, I'm sure they're figuring this out too in their own way or trying to, but like, this is like the 101 version of enterprise business versus the 201. Like the 101 is build a great product and sell it. And it looks a little bit like SaaS and, Dave Morin can sign up for it and then add 4 team members. fine. But like the really successful companies like figure out, and even like an Airtail or whatever, they have to figure out their enterprise sales motion, which means building a framework and an approach which gets other people paid really well, which means they want to sell it, right?
So Sam, is what you're talking about like, a tractor company wants to use AI to do something, but they don't really know how to do that. So they pay Accenture a lot of money.
They got to pay someone. And like, but importantly, they're going to go to Accenture and say, Accenture, how do we do this? Right? Or like bid for something. Accenture needs something they can sell where they get to do a little bit of work and like can customize it in a certain way and like charge a lot of money for it. And so if it's too easy, right, or there isn't that enterprise pull, then Accenture says, well, I can't sell you the OpenAI post API because like your developers will be like, well, we'll just do this ourselves.
I think consultants will find a way. But
you're arguing that they would use Llama in this regard, and then like.
Well, I think Llama's well set up for this because then they can say, well, you don't want to use the off the shelf stuff. You want to use a custom instance.
You want to fine tune? Can't you fine tune OpenAI?
You want an Accenture Tractor API, and we will make that for you. And we will use this open source tool so you own your data. And like it costs $10 million.
The irony of what this argument is that isn't AI going to kill a lot of these consulting firms? Like they've already laid off so many employees.
No, I think that's a classic. Like this is the same thing as like AI is going to kill,
but commoditize in some way.
I think it depends on your time horizon. Short term, I think it's creating a lot of confusion and uncertainty, which is a great play for these firms. Dave, what do you think about what this means for startups? And like back to just like what is the current temperature on how startups are sort of working with different models? Where are they leaning?
So to riff on a few of these things, I think that, Sam, the business model question that you started out with today, or the business model alignment, I think is an important point to think about. I think it's very hard to take Meta seriously when they talk about open source because they are a highly centralized system that controls the rents that get paid to every single player in their ecosystem. And so when Meta says something like, we really believe that open source is the best way and that open innovation is the best way, that's not how they run their business. And so it's super hard to take them seriously on this. But I do think that your point is correct that in this case, the alignment with the business model enables them to give this away open source in this way. Now, the second question, Jess, that you're asking is, how does this affect startups? Well, when we were building Facebook, and ironically, I ran into somebody here yesterday who was, in that first building at Facebook, hadn't seen in a long time. We had some old stories about it last night. We were using Linux and we were using MySQL, and we were doing like pretty serious engineering that wasn't as simple as one API call. I mean, back in those days, it was actually quite hard to get any tool off the shelf that was one API endpoint that you could hit and do anything with. And things are different today. In 2024, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of tools you can use that have one endpoint or 5 endpoints that you can hit and do all kinds of amazing things. You can download thousands of open source frameworks for servers and UIs and all kinds of things. And so the world is kind of split into the tale of two cities, right? On the startup side of things, you tend to have people using these endpoints because it's fast, it's easy. You can do it in your basement, like Sam said. And then when it comes to big businesses, which I actually hadn't thought of what you were just saying, Sam, that the Accentures, the sort of big business world, you're probably right, is going to make a lot of money using these open source models. I don't think that startups by default are probably going to use these. A lot of people don't have the skill set to boot these things up and to create it from the ground up, even though it's open source. I think if Meta wants to pitch this pitch, I think they're going to have to become a lot more like Apple or Microsoft, frankly. Microsoft provides tools like Visual Studio. Apple creates tools like Xcode and Swift, and they create a lot of SDKs and frameworks that enable you to use in some cases, they're open source tools that they've created as well, right? But they make it easier for startups to get up and running on these things with a series of tools that are, really effective for simplifying these things. And I think that that's kind of the reality, actually, of the computer science engineering skill set today, is that there's a lot of people that don't have the skill set to go that far down into these things. And they can't just take a, open source thing that's as complicated as this and make as much progress in the speed of time that you would want to.
Well, but Dave, you could literally just have a post API. You'd be like, here's a key, post it, write some shit, comes back. Like, that's like, I think
you mean to the open source model?
Yeah, just like host it somewhere.
Sure.
And like I just think that that's kind of the emotional.
I mean, to me, this is actually one of the things Meta has always been missing.
Yeah,
and it goes back to actually when I was working on the Facebook platform, we had a project back then that we called the Grid, and we were actually we actually did for a hot minute right after we launched the platform provide server resources to startups in order to scale. But Meta typically has not provided this, and kind of let Amazon do it, let Azure do it or whatever. But
what was the Grid, Dave?
It was a project. It was very short-lived. Right after we launched Facebook platform, a lot of our developers were having a super hard time scaling. And so we wanted to make it fast and easy. We wanted to get them closer to our infrastructure, i.e. like literally in the same building as our infrastructure. And so we provided, server resources to people. We never really made the business case, to Sam's point earlier. Like, we had higher margin businesses at the time, and those became the priority.
There isn't a good business case for it. The reason it's a
for cloud.
No, for that type of cloud. Like, it's not a good business. It's like, it's just a good marketing play, right? It's like,
around the same time, Google did the same thing, and it was called like Startup Engine or something.
Which is now GCP.
And I was going to say, which is now Google Cloud. So, I mean,
and this is the missing leg to me, to Meta's, sort of pitch to developers. This is one of the key missing things. I mean, even Apple provides this. It might not be as good, but they do provide these server-side endpoint capabilities that you're talking about, Sam.
Well, I obviously think that they would be good to provide them. Like, to be clear, I just want to be clear about the justification for it, right? And the justification for it is like, like Heroku's an okay business. It's not a great business, right? It got sold for something, right? Like this, like the thing people forget is like there's developer mindshare. Who's cool on Hacker News is just extremely different for where money is spent and where value is created.
But Sam, this is a trivial expense. I mean, we're talking.
I think it's great marketing dollars. I just think we should call it what it is, which is you call
pure
it
marketing. I mean, I was literally on Reddit yesterday, and Meta is running ads for AI on Reddit. Like, that's ridiculous. I don't think it's great. It's like, that's a ridiculous waste of resources. Take the resources that are running AI ads on Reddit and put them towards cloud computing. I don't think they're very expensive,
those ads.
Well, but Dave, this is an org design problem, because like, here's the reality is someone got a budget to like run ads, and the people who do that, they don't even know how to make the pitch for being like, can we just host the open source API somewhere so people can script against it? Like, it's just two different things. And the reality is if you talk about big companies versus small companies, in a super small company, it's all the same people, right? And so someone's like, oh yeah, like this is actually a better marketing strategy. But in a big company, it's just like they don't know how to spend the money that way.
But you could do something even more sophisticated than this, which is like, you could give people a Docker instance that they could just like boot up anywhere that runs this stuff instantly and creates an endpoint. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
DigitalOcean, whatever, one click, blah, blah, blah. Here's an endpoint.
So just to bring, Dave, I think you raised some excellent points, especially just like the culture of a company around the tools and capabilities. And I mean, you guys both had a front seat to that with Facebook platform, which was impactful until it wasn't, right? I mean, in its moment, but ran its course. Mark also talks about open compute. Do you guys familiar with that? He uses that as another example of their open source. Like rang a bell.
What is that? Oh, is this the data center thing where they open source the compute architectures?
Across all the different data centers.
And that helps them basically get more capabilities for their architecture, right? Like it ended up benefiting.
Yeah, sure.
So that was interesting. But I think your point, I mean, you also raised the point about, the hypocrisy of being a closed system. And then you look at Apple, which is obviously a very closed system, but to your point, has invested heavily in certain types of tools. So I guess my takeaway is it's not as simple as your framework. It's really also very much in your execution. And if we compare this to crypto, that's one of my questions. Obviously, there will be an open source AI economy. It will exist. But
it already does.
But in terms of scale, right? Crypto is still quite niche, and to state the obvious. So
this is, look, in the end of the day, there's huge liability to open and closed, right? And either extreme is actually, if you said the whole world is closed or the whole world is open, they're both kind of problematic, right? I think the unfortunate reality of technology is the world has natural friction in it. So the natural state of the world should be a hybrid, right? Some stuff is closed, some stuff is open. Not everything's perfectly resolved. It's kind of a mucky thing, but at least there's resilience because you have kind of the properties of both. The problem with technology is that it tends towards disequilibrium. So you end up with this push, and we've seen this over time in history, where things veer more extreme directions, right? You just take the surveillance state. It's you can have laws written federally, but it's kind of hard to enforce them in a physical world. And so there's some squishiness to them. The speed limit 65, but you go 67, you go 50. It doesn't, enforcement really matters. The problem is as technology, as power, as scale ramps up, the risk to getting things wrong goes up. And the ability to end up with perfect centralization, right? The Chinese surveillance state or a full decentralized Mad Max world is more probable. And so I think the real answer is there's no 100% answer. It's good that everyone's doing all these things, and hopefully there's some sort of balance between open and closed.
Yes.
And it's really good that a very large organization that has immense resources is pushing on the open direction. I think that's the real positive here, that it's a very serious effort that, isn't it true that Meta has something 50% of all of the GPUs in the world?
These things are so expensive, right? That forget the impact of them. They're nuclear weapon style expenses, right? And so it is good that at least one player that can afford it, right, is actually putting out that stuff, right, and taking an open model, because it's very plausible that if they didn't, you would end up with 12 providers or 10 providers, and it would all be closed because no one can afford to play, right? And that is the thing about, in terms of just moving sheer resources into making it happen. So it is good, right? I hopefully they'll be joined by one or two others and hopefully the problem is you just have this power law of cost where, you can't band a bunch of $10 billion companies together to compete with $1 trillion company in this. You need $1 trillion company to throw their hat in the ring. And then maybe you get a bunch of $10 billion companies like Accenture glomming around them, right? So I'm glad, in some ways, Meta is providing that nexus.
Can I tangent the Meta conversation to another Meta conversation, which is Meta trying to invest in Luxottica / Supreme. And Google now trying to get in on it too. There's this rivalry of who's going to invest in Luxottica is the sunglasses company that also owns Ray-Ban. But also
do they own Ray-Ban? It's oh man, my Ray-Bans are at stake.
Also they acquired Supreme. And so the question is...
that was a long time ago.
I know.
Luxottica owns Supreme forever.
Everyone's saying, that Zuck's in his hype beast era is how people are explaining it with the gold chains and the hair. And obviously there's been a lot of work on smart glasses via Ray-Ban through Meta. Google is now also trying to get in on that game. But Supreme is such a great brand collab that the Supreme Ray-Ban Meta glasses could be coming.
I don't know. Supreme's kind of old.
Wait, what is Supreme?
Supreme's not cool
You don't know
anymore.
Supreme, the sneaker brand, Jess?
Oh, the sneaker brand.
What?
I'm aware of it, but this is not our household.
Oh, This is why we're your partners.
Are you surprised?
The lessons need more drip.
Oh, I'm so glad we're here.
I don't even know what that means.
Oh, Dave, do you want to take
more
this one?
More drip?
Dave, you go for it.
Oh God, what? I don't know. Go for what?
Explain Supreme.
It's Supreme a sneaker company.
Supreme is a...
It's a cheeseburger with 2 buns, right? Or 2 patties.
No, that's the
Supreme.
The deluxe pizza.
It's a very old streetwear brand, actually, that kind of ignited what we now think of as the collab streetwear culture.
Drop.
Like Supreme was really kind of the first in that lineage. And so,
when you say collab, you're talking about like then Supreme would collab with someone else and they'd come up with like their
famously they went to North Face, actually, which was one of the first ones where people were like, eh? And they took like old North Face, the down puffy North Face jacket, which like explorers use, and they turned it into a streetwear thing. And so it was like a real kind of cultural crossover thing. They were like the first to do that.
But this is now over. Like I shouldn't be referring to this to be cool.
No, it's fine. It's just, it was one of the first. There's, if you really wanted to be up on today, you'd be talking about Kith or, a few other brands that are more
Kith?
popular.
It's another type of burger.
Sam, do you know what Kith is?
A Kith with cheese.
Oh man,
Kith,
Britt, this
K-I-T-H.
is reminding me. We had at a private conference last year. Britt led a whole panel on pop culture.
It was really fun for me. I'm happy to do that again.
This is beyond pop culture. This is street culture.
This is like just you might have missed this one.
K-I-T-H. Kith.
K-I-T-H.
We're not street. I will say I did learn about this.
Oh, I do like these Nikes though. Those are good.
What's the Bratz doll thing?
No, that's our PCC, Sam. We're not there yet.
Kith does great tennis stuff. There's a lot of good stuff.
I'm feeling Kith's vibe.
My point in this is like, I know you're down on Vision Pro, but the smart glasses are happening, you guys.
Oh no, yeah.
Britt, what does this have to do with open source?
No, this was her Meta pivot.
It was my Meta pivot. I just think it's interesting that they want to own a 5% stake in Luxottica and that Google.
Why is that?
Because
it's smart.
It's smart. But Google's also trying to bid for it. And
why don't they just buy the whole thing?
I know. I was actually wondering that too. I'm like, what does 5%
probably
get
tried. You? Guys, Lena Khan ain't letting them buy anything. So that's why they're not buying the whole thing. Amazon couldn't buy a vacuum cleaner, guys.
Joe Biden's still got 6 months left. Don't touch his Ray-Bans.
6 months, 3 months. Oh, until January.
Well, the Ray-Bans were interesting because that was actually like a dead brand they like revived, right, and upscaled. Right?
Ray-Ban never died, dude.
No, it did. It basically was like this downscale shitty brand, and like they were dying.
No. Ray-Ban's like a utility brand.
No,
man.
they took them off the market. They took them off the market for several years.
Oakley's definitely died.
Ray-Ban never went anywhere.
It did.
I'm digging these Kith shoes, by the way, guys.
We're so happy to welcome you into the culture.
I don't know. I think it's. I agree that the
Dave with his Ray-Ban aviators
is happening. I hilariously ran into a tech executive like 6 months ago. It was like at the time the first person who didn't work at Meta I saw wearing those glasses unironically at a conference, and I was like surprised. I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Oh, I love them." I'm like, "Well, what do you love about them?" He's like, "I don't take photos of them. I don't do anything with that. I just like listening to podcasts on them." Right, the bone connectivity thing, and like it is interesting. People they've gotten to a form factor that makes sense. I left my pair, my second generation pair in Bolinas, and I haven't had them all summer, and I'm really annoyed about it because they're great. And I
keep forgetting to buy them. I need to get some.
Well, I bought multiple pairs of V1, which were a little disappointing, which kind of made me hesitant to buy V2.
I think that's what's happening to me. Is I'm like V1 was like it was like fine.
V2's good, and I assume V3 and 4 will be great. I don't really understand what the 5% thing is. Is that just like a blocking move?
No. I mean, I think that it's a very classic tech hardware story, and that these tech companies try and do it, the Googles and the Metas on their own, and to build up all these hardware capabilities.
They totally misexecute on every vector.
They misexecute. Their investors get pissed how much money has gone down the drain. Shout out, I saw...
It's just not their business model, to Sam's earlier point. Like, it's just like you can't fit this business model into an ad company. You just can't.
And then I think what happened, and we recently published an interview with the CEO of Luxottica. I think it was the CEO. I will check. Senior executive CEO. And so Meta was an early mover there. And
let's get that person on the pod.
And now everyone else is trying to get in. And so I think it's sort of like your pound of flesh, getting your stake to make sure that you're not going to be at the bottom of the line for this.
How big is this company though? To Sam's earlier point, like I think actually one of the more interesting points in this pod today is just how big Meta is. Like when you're dealing with $1 trillion companies, $10 billion companies or even $100 billion companies, enabling them, making them successful becomes a really important point. And, we sit here trying to talk about startups a lot, but like there's so many players in these ecosystems. And I just have to ask this question, which is like, why buy 5% of this thing?
It's like
why
a $30 billion company.
50%.
No, it's a 90 European. What's a European?
Oh, they do 30 billion in
what's
revenue.
A euro worth? It's worth 90 billion euro European units of currency.
90?
Yeah, but like that's like less than 10% of Meta's market cap.
Oh, to be clear, yeah, it's about $100 billion. No, I don't think look.
If this is the future of computing is on your face, then like buy this company.
Again, no one's going to let him buy this company. I don't agree. I don't disagree.
It's European. They can't do shit. But the thing is, like, let's be clear. Luxottica is not making the hardware or the computers. They're like making the 2-cent pieces of plastic with the lenses in them and then charging.
Yeah, but it turns out to be hard to be good at that.
No, I think they just care about the brand.
At massive scale.
They want the
Ray-Ban
brand.
To make that stuff at massive scale is not easy.
I don't know. I think Meta could figure out how to make sunglasses.
It's a marketing. It's a fashion company.
Yeah, that's why. It's a brand fashion collab.
Well, yeah, this warrants more investigation. But I think
I'm actually curious who's actually making the glasses for what it's worth, though. Because to be clear, hardware is hard, and Meta doesn't have a great history in it. No one does. I mean, they've gotten a lot better, obviously. Luxottica, I promise you, is not making the hardware. Like they print lenses and like slap plastic on them with a brand and make a bunch of money on margin. Like they're not a manufacturing company.
We have to ask our friend Robert, who was a glasses mogul in his days.
Yeah.
I wonder if Acquired should do a podcast on this. That would be very interesting.
One more Meta headline on the theme before we go to a PCC that I will be taking notes on. Hold on, let me make sure we publish this story. I thought I saw it. Oh,
are you publishing stories with information as we do the podcast? No,
but I thought I think we published it yesterday. I don't see it on our website, which is another problem, but the Threads no politics policy hitting some internal debate. So we don't have to go deep into Threads, but we've talked at length about both how it kind of emerged as this breath of fresh air from the fierce debates on X, especially around politics. And its whole shtick has been to steer clear and not actively recommend political content. And then we saw Biden post his decision to step aside on both X and Threads. And my colleagues have some good inside detail about the conversation inside Meta that kicked off around the policy. It just reminds me what a fine line it is when you're in the business of engagement. And as we head into yet another fierce election cycle, obviously
and
these issues are going to...
And there's only 3 things that engage anyone, which is politics, the NFL, and Taylor Swift.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought that was quite interesting and just a reminder of how all these social platforms are trying to calibrate, where advertisers are, where engagement is, but then also these, it'd be nice to have a real civic-minded debate on all things, but it's not usually the way it goes.
The point is, I do think it was crazy that Biden posted his like letter on social platforms and like that was it, right? And like
yeah, it's pretty wild.
Like whoa, right?
Kind of strange.
Where we're at. It's like talk about visions.
There's an Oval. I mean, by the time listeners hear this, I think he will have addressed everyone.
Was it just that he was too sick?
I think he also really. I think that was probably.
He just loves Twitter.
The overwhelming reason, but I think also, he didn't want it to go through the normal channels because the rumor mill was just so. I mean, it was positioned by those great New York Times stories the day after when, all those people who never talk then talk at length to show how involved they were in all the things that transpire.
I just love the idea of Biden being like, hey, I'm going to post something on the Twitter. Can someone tell me the password?
Well, he has to have multi-factor auth too.
Yeah, he gets a text message to put his
He's
code
like,
in.
what is a 2-factor authentication? And then
You kind of have to give it to him for doing that. It's like a masterful political move.
It's like he's sitting on the toilet posting to Twitter just like the rest of us, like stepping down.
Is that where you're at,
I think
Sam?
the internet, by the way, has been great the last couple days. Like the memes are great.
Well, this is a perfect segue into the PCC.
Yes. Okay,
Jess.
Brett.
Okay.
Take it away.
So, Charlie XCX is a British pop star. I'm not sure if you know who
that.
she is. You didn't? Okay, good.
Yep.
Sam? Yes?
Yep.
Of course, I didn't know that.
Okay. She has that song. Boom, clap, dun, 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 the
Oh, I
beat
like that
goes
song.
on. Okay, good. So you know who she is. Anyway, she had a new
We're
album
totally
come
with
out
you.
this summer called Brat. It's lime green. It's all about, she says the girl who's a little messy and likes to party and says some dumb things sometimes, but she's also kind of herself. She's very blunt, a little volatile. And it's become this meme.
I'm reading has a Bic lighter, right? And like smokes cigarettes.
It's just like the opposite of the Barbie summer last summer is Brat summer. And so everyone's now calling this summer Brat summer, which is just like be yourself, be a little messy, just be.
Is it an
bold.
acronym or does it literally mean brat?
What do you wear in the Brat summer? Are you like Birkenstocks?
No, it's like a
like
little bit emo, dark, messy. Your hair's not done. Like you don't have to be the perfect
I'm living that.
girl,
Okay.
perfect guy, all
This is
coiffed.
Brat.
Yeah, Brat summer. So this whole meme has been happening
like,
all summer.
You're not Barbie and you're not Ken.
And Kamala has like embraced a lot of that, vibe, just being herself. She kind of cackles a lot. She says things that are sort of weird sometimes, like off the cuff. She's not super media trained. And so
Well, there's
Charlie
the whole
XCX,
coconut thing, right?
Charlie posted like Kamala is Brat, and that now has taken over the internet. And the coolest thing I think is that the Biden HQ Instagram thread, and maybe on Twitter too, like that account actually just embraced this meme going on, made the whole like profile lime green with black that says Kamala, like just like went for it. So now she's like super trending with Gen Z.
If you're not doing that in modern culture, like your social media team should be fired, right? This is Ryan Reynolds 101.
That's table stakes. But still, we can call it out.
She should probably start smoking cigarettes, like publicly. I don't know. I think what's interesting is like we had old man versus old man, and everyone was sad. We now have like very old man, right, versus like young black female. Right. And like, it's just going to be really interesting because they're going to run completely opposite strategies. And like, if this is, I saw some article pointing out the fact that like all these old people are sad that Biden's not running because they feel like it's an indictment of them, that it's time for them to step out of the way. And I do think
such a stupid article. I saw that too.
But I think it's like an interesting generational moment where like, are the olds still in control? Right. Or will like the youngs, rise? The problem is like as a middle, I'm like not old or young. I don't like any of them, right? Like, I'm like,
but that's your job as a middle, Sam.
As a middle, I'm like, you guys all are terrible.
Does it depend on the VP pick though? I heard a rumor. It's not going to happen. I know it'll be Kelly or Shapiro, but I liked the rumor of Mark Cuban being the VP pick. I was like, that'd be super interesting. Throw a little curveball in this whole thing.
I like Mark Kelly. I've met him a few times. The astronaut Mark Kelly.
I know him as the author of the book Mousetronaut, which was one of our children's favorites.
I would do a Mark
think it's going to be him.
Speaking of which, you guys have some awesome books in this house.
Yeah.
Yeah, you like that, Dave? Which one do you like? Which one do you have in front of you?
I'm reading The Defense of the Realm.
Oh, that's a good book.
The authorized history of MI5.
I enjoyed that.
Oh yeah, that's a good. Yeah, we like our spycraft.
Carefully about which books we put in what places.
I like it.
So Mark Kelly's good. The only problem with Mark Kelly, and I actually really like him. I've had the opportunity to meet him a few times and chat with him one-on-one. Is he's very short, and I think that's a problem. Also, on the plus side, he has an identical twin brother. So if he gets injured, someone can stand in for him.
Okay, I'm sure this is how the vetting is transpiring. Okay, so Britt, just to bring us to a close. So Brat, it's this Brat side. Like, where's Brat going? I saw a headline saying Brat's over.
It'll just be like 3 days and then we'll move on to something else.
No, this is the Brat summer, so it'll go through the summer.
Well, although I don't know, it did seem to trigger this like coconut emoji meme, which seems to be taking over all over the place.
What is the coconut? I don't get the coconuts.
It's part
Kamala
of... Go ahead.
had one of these memes where she was giving an interview and she said something like, "What do you think? I just fell out of a coconut tree." It's like an old saying her mom would say. And so now the coconut and the palm tree have become like the rallying cry all over social media on every profile everywhere.
I do think that the memeability of a candidate is important. Trump is actually quite memeable. He's done very well.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a grandmaster at it, right?
I don't know how explicit the Kamala team is being about this, but I would be very curious to see what their meme strategy is.
I don't know if this is a meme per se, but they're posting they're making fun of her laugh themselves.
Yes.
Right.
If I'm the social media person who 2 days ago was told, by the way, you're no longer doing Biden's social media, you're doing Kamala, I am no longer quitting my job. I'm so psyched. I'm I have a million ideas for how this could go. I'm getting her all kind of fun interviews, not just stupid political interviews. There's so much cool stuff.
It's not dad joke memes anymore. The Biden memes were always kind of forced, whereas Kamala is just naturally a walking meme, kind of like Trump, I think.
So I wonder, if I were one of these social media people, wouldn't you release an app which is a meme keyboard for the candidate? Why doesn't people build shit like that, right? If I were in a campaign,
totally.
I'd be I want the Trump keyboard or the Kamala keyboard that only posts memes from them for different situations.
Totally.
That's how you win an election.
Okay.
Such a good idea.
Free advice. Take it or leave it. Friends, this has been a productive episode, from streetwear to the future of open source and computing architectures. I think we've covered it all. Any last plugs? Anything people are excited about as
the Olympics starting?
Oh,
we'll talk more about that next week.
And the Twisters movie is really good.
Everyone should go see
it.
Didn't they make that movie in the 90s?
No, but it's not.
Yes,
it's not
it's a remake, Sam. It's a great summer movie.
Steven Spielberg produced it, and as did Frank Marshall. Two big hitters.
It's great.
Yeah. We have started Dark Matter like the rest of the universe.
Great summer movie.
Guys, I'm going to get one of your $1,000 microphones because I feel left out.
Yeah, you should get one. It's
I was
fantastic.
just waiting for that. Yeah, because I think this was once yours, but
just don't accidentally send it here.
Well, friends, listeners, viewers, thank you guys for tuning in for another week to the back channel for your great ideas and ferocious debates, I will add. We appreciate them all. And with this insane summer news cycle, we'll see you here again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
See you guys later.
If you enjoyed this show, please leave us a virtual high five by rating it and reviewing it on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Find more information about each episode in the show notes and follow us on social media by searching for @MoreOrLess, @DaveMorin, @Lesson, @JLesson, and as for me, I'm @Brit. See you guys next time.